Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Though in this case I am using Realms of Chaos footage for the sake of this particular video, simply because, well, Realms of Chaos runs significantly better in terms of the end-turn performance. Which is probably something very relevant for this particular video. The idea that what we really need right now in Total War is a better engine, a new engine. Because we've been using the same one since Empire, and while certainly Creative Assembly has added new things to this engine, it's still ultimately the same engine that we've had for a fairly long time. And we absolutely do need a new one. Because right now, it's becoming clear more and more and more that the engine does have limitations on what it can do. And that's really the problem that we are confronted over here with as players. The idea that the engine is no longer up to the task. Now, performance in Total War has always been a tricky affair. Like many Total War games when they came out, and some of them even to this day, just ran exceptionally bad. Like, you look at the performance of Empire, you look at the performance of Napoleon, you look at games that have come out since then, you don't really see games that are performing exceptionally well. That isn't really the way Total War has handled as a series. But I don't think this is acceptable any longer. So what is the problem, though, specifically that Warhammer 3 has brought up as of late? Well, performance, right? You collect the intern in Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires, and it just takes a fairly long time. Now, this isn't the case in Realms of Chaos. Realms of Chaos runs fairly well, but what I do think we need for Warhammer 3 is certainly a Potion of Speed update. That's one thing this game does need, I believe. But for Total War as a whole, yeah, we do need a new engine, because you're seeing the limitations of the engine and what it can accomplish in a campaign at the moment. You can see the limitations in how many armies you can maintain during the course of a campaign. Those kind of things are important, I would argue, right now. But what's the issue? How have we gotten really to this point where, you know, the idea of a new engine is... the notion of getting a new engine for Total War is very significant. And I'm not arguing in favor of any particular engine, one way or another, but what I am arguing is the idea that we do need a new one. Well, beyond the performance increases that we absolutely do need for something like Warhammer 3, the reason we need a new engine has to do with the way campaigns are played right now in Total War Warhammer 3. Because you have many races, ever since Immortal Empires came out, that have an insane level of scalability. Now, this isn't to say that other races can't win a campaign rather quickly. They can, and one of the things to point out is the idea of winning a campaign within like 30 turns or something is not new. You could do it in Medieval 2, you could do it in Rome 1, potentially, depending on how you played. It was very possible in those older titles to achieve a campaign victory very quickly. What is different now is not necessarily the number of turns. What is different is in the number of armies, the amount of territory, the number of units you're bringing to a battlefield. And that is something that Total War right now, the current Total War engine, just can't handle all that well, from my personal perspective. And that's why we need a new engine. But what exactly is the problem that I'm talking about? Well, the problem goes along these lines. We have, like right now, besides the fact that the AI cannot handle multiple settlements very well, beyond the fact that the in-turn performance of the game is not that great, there's also the fact that just the frame rate tanks in a significant fashion if you're playing with too many armies. Like you play, and hell, if you have vision over the Immortal Empires map, which is kind of weird because the performance actually degraded through a patch. I'm not sure exactly what they changed. Like basically, Immortal Empires actually ran a bit better a while ago, and then the performance degraded. I am not sure exactly what's happened with that. I have no idea. But Creative Assembly, in some way, screwed up. Let's put it like that. They've made some changes in terms of performance, and the performance has degraded. But right now, it's clear the engine cannot handle this kind of playstyle. Where, like right here, I have 2 full stacks. It's turn 10. I'm getting a 3rd stack. Hell, I have even a 4th stack. I could recruit more units, so I'm probably not going to go with 4 full stacks right here. It's kind of pointless. It's just, I'm just using that extra army. Having more armies, like this kind of playstyle, some people are in favor of a more limited playstyle. I personally believe very firmly that having more armies and the ability of playing around with those armies on the campaign map, they don't have to be full stacks. But having more armies in general gives you more options for everyone involved, creates a better campaign situation, and it's not necessarily in favor of the very aggressive expansionist playstyle that I'm showcasing over here. It's in favor of the idea of having more armies, having more choices, having more consequences to those choices. When you have more territory that you have to worry about, and you have to manage your resources across that territory, that does create a better campaign dynamic than a more limited one. And it is my firm belief that Creative Assembly should embrace this particular playstyle as opposed to the more limited campaign playstyle that we've had ever since Shogun 2. Because in Shogun 2, even maintaining a full stack was something very difficult, even if you're talking about Ashigaru units. In Rome, we had army limitations, and Attila, that continued, and so on and so on and so on. And that's not really, I think, very applicable right now in the way a Total War campaign should be played, or what's the best right now for a fun and exciting campaign in Total War. Having more forces creates a better campaign system. But the problem is managing all of that is actually tricky, and the AI can't handle it. But beyond that, the performance in general, the frame rate, in that kind of dynamic, just the performance of the game just goes down the toilet. That is why we need a new engine. But it's not just in having a new engine that could support a higher performance in the game. It's also having a new engine where when you go into a battle with multiple armies, you don't end up with a miserable experience, because Total War handles about 20 units just fine in a battle. But when you add in, when you just add in reinforcements in a battle, it doesn't even have to be like 20 units coming into, it doesn't have to be like, oh, you attacked an army of 20 units, there's some reinforcements coming in. It's not just that, but like 40-man battles, let alone, 60 units on one side, 60 units on another. They're not great battles right now. That's the problem. That's the reason we need a new engine, so that new engine can actually handle all of this. Because right now, the current engine of Total War just doesn't handle it. Beyond performance, you see a lot of issues with AI, you see a lot of abusable behavior, you see a lot of things. Now, this is probably why Creative Assembly even, and I made a mistake there, but this is probably why Creative Assembly introduced those limitations to begin with. It had to do with the performance, what the AI could handle, what it couldn't handle, because people have been using mods for a long time to, increase armies and all that. And the game in general, the game series in general hasn't handled it. I really think we need to move away from this playstyle of like just having a 20-man army, fighting against another 20-man army, and then adding more and more armies of 20 units as well. Like, that's one of the things that needs to be changed, I feel, right now in Total War, because it doesn't work all that well. I am not arguing in favor at all of an idea of limited armies. I think like limiting armies is just not going to create a great campaign dynamic either. Like, that's one of the issues I have with SFO. And look, I don't care about what SFO does, really. Like, to me, it's irrelevant. But I do care when that kind of perspective influences Total War thinking. From my point of view, having more armies, having a campaign that's not necessarily faster. Like, this is the point. Like, it's not about fast campaigns. It's about more stuff to do every single turn from the very beginning of a campaign. That is one of the fundamental differences you could argue between something like Radius and SFO, for instance. Just as an example to use there, but just to mods. And certainly I am in favor of the Radius side of the argument over there. Now, I'm not saying Radius does things perfectly. It is still, there's still a lot of issues with that. But I think like from a playstyle choice, I do think that the idea of just having more stuff to do and more choices and a more interesting campaign dynamic to worry about is something that just overall makes for a better experience. That's where I stand on that issue. Of course, again, not everyone will agree with that particular sentiment, fair enough, but like the engine just doesn't handle scale very well, and that's why we need a new one, because you see a degradation of performance, you see the way the battles handle, you see a lot of things that can be abused just because, again, the engine can't handle it. Like, there's a lot of discussion about, oh, the AI is not particularly great. Well, okay, fair enough. The AI is not particularly great. I agree with that sentiment. I think no one would necessarily disagree with that sentiment. And the AI is something that Creative Assembly can improve on again and again. And they have. Like, people tend to ignore this aspect. And people want to have this myth like, oh, the Warhammer 2 AI was better. No, the Warhammer 2 AI was not better than the Warhammer 3 AI. That is a myth. What happened is the Warhammer 2 AI cheated far more than the Warhammer 3 AI. And I think the reason we have ended up in this situation right now with regards to how the game is with scalability was kind of an accident, if you will. I'm pretty certain Creative Assembly did not intend for campaigns to be played like this, suffice to say. I'm pretty certain that this was not Creative Assembly's intent. Or maybe it was the intent of certain people in the company, but not necessarily a company policy, if you will. That would be my personal perspective on that. Like, it wasn't deliberate, but we ended up in this situation regardless. And the reason we've ended up in this kind of situation is just certain races, Greenskins, Skaven, Dark Elves, High Elves, etc., Kebie, just have that kind of scalability in their facts. Like, it's freaking turn 13, and I'm controlling 18 settlements. Do you realize how insane that is? Play Shogun 2, 18 turns, controlling this much. It's let's say, absurd would not even begin to describe this particular situation. But it is happening. It is the norm right now for quite a lot of races in Warhammer 3. And by the way, this is one of the reasons Realms of Chaos doesn't work particularly well right now. You played Realms of Chaos, any of the DLCs in Realms of Chaos are just freaking awful at the moment. Simply because, well, the game, the engine, the game, the dynamics of the game, the AI, anything you can think of just doesn't handle it all that well at the moment in Warhammer 3. Just simple as that. It's not really handled all that well. And then you come across various limitations as well, like certain races, like Creative Assembly has various mechanics for campaigns to be played slower. So I'm pretty damn certain that CA did not intend for this to be the case. But even when Realms of Chaos came out, despite the way despite the really bad design of virtually every race, you play a campaign as Scarbrand in the vanilla of Warhammer 3. And you realize, and people did realize that, well, we can win this extremely quickly. We can overwhelm the AI, and the AI doesn't necessarily have any good solutions for what we can do. And that's kind of the problem as well. Now, again, I do prefer a more active playstyle, but I also want to draw a line in the sand and say that it is important, regardless of the playstyle you have, it is important to actually have an AI that is capable of somehow, in some way, keeping up with you in some way, because like otherwise you just end up obliterating everything in your path. Now, some people argue in favor of garrisons, some people argue in favor of X, Y, and Z. I just think, like, yeah, the AI needs better decision making as well, and the reason we ended up in this insane scalability situation in Immortal Empires that's also filtered in Realms of Chaos is because of this. A lot of settlements in both Realms of Chaos and Immortal Empires are very, very close to each other, right? That's one of the big issues right now with the game. So you have a lot of settlements close to each other. You have post-battle loot. You have post-battle loot with these settlements. So so you can go turn after turn after turn fighting one battle over after another. Like over here, I'm just gonna annihilate Azazel by just marching all of my armies against him, and he's not gonna be able to stop me. And Miao Ying is like just going on a world tour. She's ultimately gonna enter in the Realms of Chaos. And you just end up in this absolutely ridiculous, absurd situation where it's like, oh, look, another confederation, another stack of troops to throw into the grinder. Like, seriously, how the freaking heck is the AI is capable? Like, yeah, this is absurd. Like, if you're comparing this kind of campaign pacing, and it's like, it's not necessarily available in every race, but every race has a campaign that can be won quickly. It just, certain campaigns can do insane crap like this, and others can't. That's kind of the issue. And I'm in a positive income situation. That's crazy. That genuinely is crazy. I'm not even joking. There's the height of absurdity as I would personally see it. Oh boy, and we're just getting started. Holy crap, we're just getting started. Like, you start playing campaigns where the dynamics are, you're not even concerned about winning, you're concerned about how can I confederate other factions. And Cafe, for instance, easy. Like, that's how you play every Cafe campaign right now in both Realms of Chaos and Immortal Empires. But because settlements are closed, post-battle loot is very much an important thing, a very important part of a game right now. Because of those particular dynamics in the game as it is, you end up in insane situations during the course of your campaigns. Absolutely insane to a level that you never would have expected before. And that's what we have in Warhammer 3. Now, how could Creative Assembly do it better? It's better AI, better performance, new engine to support that, new engine to support how armies interact with each other, how armies handle on the campaign map, as opposed to just like the 20-man Doom stacks against the 20-man Doom stacks. That's kind of the problem. Those are some of the things that really ought to be changed right now. I'm gonna throw 3 armies against Azazel. Jesus. This is like, what is this? Like, freaking Cafe, like, you know, I am the Order Tide. Like, at this point, it's not even a question of, like, him winning. It's, like, a question, how long is it gonna take for him to win? And, mind you, Azazel is no joke of a legendary lord. It's just, yeah. Miao Ying is coming. The only thing that's actually stopping me, and this is why we need an update, the only thing that's actually actively stopping me right here is climate suitability. This is no joke. Well, let's just make an alliance. Let's start building an alliance with Grimgor, because why not? We can do so. The insanity on display here is like on a level that a few years ago, like with Warhammer 2, you wouldn't have believed this kind of campaign playstyle. Hell, I'm not sure I quite believe it even at this particular point, because it's, I mean, you look at it, this is insane. And that's one of the changes, if you will, that we do need right now in Warhammer 3. We need a new engine to support future Total War games and how they're going to be designed to handle this. Because, look, I might call it absurd, I might call it ridiculous, and it is, absolutely is. But it's also one of the best experiences that we've had in Total War. Having a lot of armies from the very beginning is good. Now, of course, we could talk about the idea that maybe we should have access to units quicker in a campaign. Maybe we can talk about the idea that we do need the ability to access various campaign systems, as opposed to embracing a really playstyle where you just win with tier 1 and tier 2 units. Like, I want to have fun with tier 3 units. I want to have fun with tier 4 units earlier on in a campaign, as opposed to like just playing the intern simulator in a campaign again and again and again, because that is not a particularly great dynamic to deal with. Mods help, warband upgrade, SFO to some extent, I guess. Radius absolutely helps improve that, improve the variety that you might have during the course of a campaign. Except, unless of course you're playing, unless you, of course, you want to enjoy the intern button simulator, as it has been called. But this pacing is better. Just needs an engine to actively support this pace. Because yeah, it doesn't, like, you look at the situation, right? I've got 2 armies. Azazel has 2 armies. Rather, I have 3 armies. If I end up fighting him, one-on-one in that situation, I'll end up in a state of affairs where it's just gonna be a clusterfuck of a battle. I mean, he's chosen to have a clusterfuck of a battle. Like, you see all these armies over here is going to be a gigantic mess. What's gonna happen right here? That the engine, not just like the game balancing or anything like that, the engine itself is not suited for right now. Simple as that. And that's what needs to be different, I would argue, in the game. Well, should I force march and obliterate Azazel? I mean, I could obliterate Azazel regardless, but let's just do it in style. Let's bring 2 armies. There we go. Done. Finished. Campaign was over by turn 6, actually. That's the crazy part. Like, the campaign was over. And now, this free army, well, just can march over here, start laying siege to Azazel's capital, and put an end to him. Craziness, craziness, craziness. Now, I want to show you, before I wrap things up, I want to show you how another game can handle this, or does handle this, reasonably well. I say reasonably well because it certainly has its problems, if you will. It certainly has its own issues, but there are other ways to handle a Total War campaign than this. So welcome to Ultimate General American Revolution, and the way this game handles its battles and the campaign situation and campaign dynamic is it's very scalable, from battles that only have a couple of hundred units to battles that have thousands, and I imagine even battles with tens of thousands in them, though so far in the campaign phase we've kind of capped out on a couple of thousand units on each side in a battle. Like over here, I've got almost 1,500 men over against 700 and a fort. This is going to be a siege battle. But what is important here is the kind of scalability. See, when 2 armies meet on the battlefield, you don't just have one army entering the field battle against another army with reinforcements coming in. No, you have everyone joining the battle. Like, everyone that's in this red square is entering the battlefield at once. Because if I start this battle, and I apologize for the loading screen, but if I start this battle, you're going to see that all of these units, these 4 units, you could even consider them 4 individual armies, though they're individual regiments which have their own units, but basically each of them would be their own army. All of these units in the red square would be entering the battlefield on their own, from the very beginning, would be deployed on the battlefield, and I'll showcase that. And units that come in as reinforcements come in from this yellow square. I think this should be expanded. This is a game that's in a beta version, basically, of an early access. There's a lot of issues with this title, but just this kind of scalability is something that makes for a better experience, from my perspective. Performance-wise, again, it's like, this is not the AAA title, but it has such great ideas that Total War could really learn from. It has its own fair share of issues, but all the same. It does quite a lot of things. So you can see over here that all the units that I had there, all those regiments, are going to be fully deployed, and if I had any kind of reinforcements, they would be deploying later on. Now, this battle, gonna win it very quickly, very easily, or maybe not. It is a siege battle, and over here in this particular game, sieges, yeah, you gotta be a bit careful. Though it's interesting to think about the fact, like, just having better performance, and this is one of the things that actually matters, because one of the reasons I dislike playing a lot of these mindless, like, this is a fairly meaningless battle. The resolve in this game is not too fantastic. Actually, it's quite downright fucking awful in a lot of ways. But the reason this is actually fun to play, one, is battles themselves are meaningful. Like, you destroy this army, the enemy is not just gonna recruit another 20 freaking units to throw against you. That's not how this game is played. That's one of the things that does matter a fair amount over here in this particular title, and why it's a pretty good game. But there's more to this particular story. It's also the fact, like, you eliminate units. You get post-battle loot, but you get post-battle loot not like you don't have an auto-resolve that just completely eliminates the entire enemy army. I understand why CA did that, but those are just specifics, right? It's the question of scalability. Like, you have battles that go from hundreds of units to thousands of units to tens of thousands of units potentially as well. And that's how this game is played, and it's actually a much better experience. Like, just going into these battles, positioning units, constantly maneuvering. The fighting itself is not necessarily the most important part. The maneuvering aspect is actually important. Also, you have supply lines, so you're not your army is not just like some, I don't know, self-contained unit that works within the context of your greater empire. You got to worry about your units having food. You have to worry about them having ammo, and you can enter battles with very, very low ammunition for your troops, and you have to plan around that. So you can't just like YOLO it one battle after another and recover very quickly, and recovery is also handled in a better way. But key point here, just the scalability of a campaign with a lot of armies and both the campaign map and battles and the dynamics between battles and the campaign. Because one of the issues I have with Total War is that battles, they just feel like they're in their self-contained universe, right? They feel very, very divorced from what is actually happening on the campaign map. Like, it doesn't matter, like, if there's 4 stacks sitting nearby, if they can't come in as reinforcements, or if you've disabled control large armies, and they're just not going to be able to enter battle until it's basically decided, then that's a problem. That doesn't happen in this game, for instance. Now, it has its fair share of issues, but I do think it handles this particular aspect substantially better. That's all I had to say. Costinier signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.